Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right on, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4-3-5-9er-2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7-3-9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds AGBT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to have a discussion about cryptocurrency. Nobody is really speaking about it unless cryptocurrency has some kind of a value of about $17,000 equivalency of Bitcoin. But Competitive Enterprise Institute, which is one of my favorite organizations out there, I call on them often, was kind enough to publish an item by John Berlau, cryptocurrency and the SEC's limitless power grab. Now, personally, I wasn't a big fan of cryptocurrency, but John Berlau has changed my mind in a big, huge way. So with that, welcome, Mr. John.
Denise, it's a pleasure to be on, and thank you for those very kind words about me and my organization, the Competitive Enterprise Institute.
Oh, man. Okay. You really did change my mind. And
Flattering.
you really did. And I watched this kind of stuff carefully. Okay. So cryptocurrency is just, I guess, the new name for other methods of value or instruments of value. And you make the argument that going back, I don't know, centuries, that there has always been another method of some kind of an instrument that has value. You could be using weapons, you could be using coupons, you could be using even a stock certificate. And in some ways, we're already in a cryptocurrency world outside of Bitcoin and all the others, because we're really not using cash anymore. We're using a piece of plastic. Is that right, John?
I think it is. I'm writing a book on George Washington's fascinating career as an entrepreneur, which should be out in the next year by St. Martin's Press. And in his day, in the colonies, when they didn't have access to British money and couldn't make their own, a lot of people were using, say, receipts for tobacco warehouse receipts. They actually called them tobacco notes, and that was circulating as money. and you have things here, even when we had the Federal Reserve in the 20th, and it's only been in the 20th century since we've had the Federal Reserve and the U.S. paper dollar. You've still had things like casino tokens, Chuck E. Cheese tokens, green stamps, which some of your older listeners
I remember those. I was just having that
those,
conversation the other day.
which were put in books, but were also traded among people and used for cash. Sometimes even unofficial businesses like mortuaries even took them. So they had they developed a value outside of what you could put in books and everything. What cryptocurrency brings to the table is, before this, there was really no way to send money over the internet without a bank. Even the most sophisticated things like PayPal or Apple Pay, you still need a bank behind it. This is because of the blockchain and because of the encryption technology, a way to send money through a peer-to-peer network without a bank backing it up. Now, how it will work and all those, several million transactions have been sent without that have been validated, but how this will work and particularly what cryptocurrencies, I can't predict, but I think it's something that will bring change, and we need to have this permissionless innovation like we had in the early days of the internet, so we can see and we can bring these gains to everyone.
And so what was really happening when you look at history, and I think that's what you were really doing in your summary, is to say, look, there are other avenues of trade and commerce going on out there, and it doesn't have to be based on some kind of coin or paper currency that has a suggested value. And what you did was, John, is you really put it into some kind of a context, and that into itself was creating other avenues of trade and commerce that I don't want to call it black market, because it wasn't. There is some black market certainly, but there's this whole other layer of exchange, correct?
Right. And some things that are just done as consumer goods could, like say some tokens or even box top, and in that case, the trading stamps, by companies like S&H Green Stamps and Blue Chip Stamps, were trading on a third-party market, and it's really only third-party market is whatever, or secondary market, even though that sounds fancy and wonky. I think is the correct term for it. It's only a black market when the government delegitimizes it and it becomes illegal. Right. Okay,
so now we have Congress. I don't think that they necessarily know what to do with this whole new platform of internet or cloud or blockchain value instruments. And so we have Congress is kind of struggling with what you do with a stock certificate or coupons or box tops or even Bitcoin. So somebody wants to start regulating that, and you're arguing don't do that. And I think you mentioned the Securities and Exchange Commission to regulate cryptocurrency, but why would the Securities and Exchange Commission kind of get into this and not, say, the Federal Reserve or Treasury?
Right, or the Federal Trade Commission, which has jurisdiction over all consumer products. Well, there are many agencies, federal and state, as well as courts and law, they're doing, they're looking at the laws that we have and doing, trying to follow the clear directives of those. And we do have laws from from before, when most people had telephones, governing things for the age of the app and cryptocurrency. But I think it's also important, and we argue at CEI, no regulation without representation, no regulation without enforcement, that the agencies not step ahead of what our elected members of Congress do. And I think that's what the SEC is doing, as far as having this rationale for regulating a coin issuance, which is not a stock or bond, that even if it doesn't promise and most do not promise like an investment return like a stock and bond, or that you have profit sharing, they trade, and the SEC is saying, well, they trade in secondary markets, and therefore they're speculative. But I could think of a lot of other things that we are speculative that should not be securities, and that most people would agree. Baseball cards, comic books. I mean, there was a comic book bubble.
Cattle, barrels of oil.
Yes, and you look at electronic things. I mean, you can trade your airline miles on some websites, and retailer points. So, I mean, that's the thing. The SEC has opened a big, that's why it's called cryptocurrency, and the SEC limitless power grab, because even if you don't care about cryptocurrency, and I argue that you do, even, I'm not saying you, I mean, but people in general, this is, the SEC says that these digital currencies can be securities because, they trade in secondary markets, or because they're sometimes bought as investments. They could apply that to just about anything.
Well, Congress doesn't know what to do on how to regulate internet. Congress doesn't know what to do to fix the whole asylum immigration thing. They're clearly way behind on this crypto thing because, it's too new. I don't think that members of Congress necessarily understand it. So does the SEC or does the Federal Reserve or any other trade organizations, do they truly understand it as well as you do?
I don't think, and that's a compliment that I do. It took me a while, and I don't think that I truly do understand it. I don't think we understand it any more than we understood what the internet capability was in 1995. There was a famous article by Clifford Stoll, who had worked, as a computer engineer and knew his stuff, and he said, "There's no way you will ever be able to send money over the internet. There's no way you can, people won't use it to buy books. I mean, they were even contemplating reading books." So. But, the Clinton administration, to its credit, and the Republican Congress, then led by Newt Gingrich, said, well, we should, since we don't know that much about it, let it bloom, protect from fraud, just like you'd protect from fraud in the physical worlds, but otherwise, let creators create. And that's the kind of culture I think we need to have for America to lead in technology and bring these innovations to the world. But unfortunately, the SEC, which is already, as some of the red tape from the SEC has made it so that, it's so much harder for companies to go public, wants to apply the same regime to the cryptocurrency world. And that's going to hold back innovation and make us, make less progress in that front, and also could be extended to even some of the traditional areas of commerce where that we've been dealing with for years, like comic books, baseball cards, airline mile rewards. So that's going to be a disaster if they keep on this course.
Your organization is the Competitive Enterprise Institute. So, the first two words, competitive enterprise, you are really selling competition with this, which I argue always makes everything stronger. Competition is a good thing. It does advocate for innovation and cleverness and so forth. So, but then you're going to have some kind of oversight to that. But I would argue maybe that's just in the fraud and abuse world. Would that be right?
Right. I think people, people should be, the government should protect from fraud, protect from deception, but otherwise leave us, free to make our own decisions as adults. But even under fraud and abuse, the question was, it's sort of like, do you send, the Department of Education after defense contractor fraud? It's just sort of like, what is the right agency and what is the agency that Congress is charged with? So I would argue cryptocurrency fraud should be stopped, but even under the fraud area, it's not securities fraud, and there are other agencies that are more capable and have more clearly have it in their charter to go after and stop this. But the SEC, as I said in my paper, is not just going even. They're claiming jurisdiction they don't have, but they're not even just going after fraud. There was one where like a website would give tokens, to be for restaurant discounts when you wrote reviews of restaurants, the Munchie coin, they called it, and no allegations of fraud, no promise of an investment return, but the SEC still shut it down went after the business, and the business agreed to shut it down.
I saw something not too long ago that there were, I don't know, upwards of 50 or 60 cryptocurrencies out there. The most well-known is Bitcoin.
There's actually, I believe, more than 1,000.
I agree with that. When I looked at that, I thought, I'm not sure how you can validate that number.
Some of the more prominent are like Ether, which is traded on the Ethereum what's called the Ethereum blockchain platform. Litecoin. There's XRP made by a company called Ripple, and so yeah, there's some. There are like 5 or 6 prominent ones, and or maybe 10 prominent ones that are in various trading markets. And then there are some. I mean, there are some that are kind of company specific, and just as a way of rewarding efforts. There's this cryptocurrency runs through like an encrypted blockchain, and for people to maintain it, they're sometimes rewarded. They're often rewarded with coins or certain tokens themselves they could use for other things. So that's so they're just different types of cryptocurrency, sometimes community specific, sometimes business specific.
If you were to give some testimony before a finance committee, what would be your primary opening argument for cryptocurrency?
My argument, and I don't really endorse any of the cryptocurrency or the internet, and certainly not a particular coin. I would say you let it happen because you let innovation happen, and you let American consumers choose, and that's what freedom is. Freedom that leads to individual prosperity.
What is the argument, the pro argument for real regulation on cryptocurrency? Is there one?
I think anytime there's a new technology, and it's the fear of the unknown, what could happen if there's fraud, and those are legitimate concerns, or if or if people use it in some way in a criminal, illicit activity. But criminals, use a lot of technology. They use airplanes and things like that. And I think the argument is sort of, in some ways, you can, while at the same time, you should. Our officers should certainly be trained. In fact, the Silk Road investigation, used, they were able to track down cryptocurrency, and in some ways, since it's pseudonymous, you use like an encryption key, and you have an ID. If there are warrants and things, it could be easier to track than unmarked dollar bills. But I think, as is the case with guns, as is the case with other things that that criminals may use, you can't punish the innocent, law-abiding civilian population for what criminals may do.
Least of which would be North Korea, because I think a lot of what North Korea is doing to keep itself whatever sustainability it has is using cryptocurrency.
But Venezuela, it's absolutely been, in a lot of the countries. From Egypt to Venezuela, it's been like Cyprus when they had that crisis. It's been a lifesaver. There was an article in the New York Times saying sometimes the New York Times publishes good stuff, like, my family wouldn't have been fed if I didn't have cryptocurrency. Venezuela had a surplus, the only thing they did, of electricity, and so people were able to mine cryptocurrency, use it on the illegal markets in Venezuela, and trade and get food in. So it's been a lifesaver in some of these repressive countries. One of the dangers is that, like, I think Maduro in Venezuela tried to issue his own government-backed cryptocurrencies, and so you're going to see you might see. I mentioned this in the paper. I'm going to write more on it. Central banks try to issue their own cryptocurrency and crowd out private cryptocurrencies, which wouldn't be good, which would be a threat to competition. But I think that if just like technology helped break the Soviet Union, I think then now it could be used to spread freedom. And if we retard American development with SEC or other red tape, it's just going to be countries like China will take more of the lead.
Oh, John, I think you've got quite the Herculean task in front of you. Making this argument, you sold me. There's still a little bit of fear, and I think fear is really because of the unknown yet. Because if you don't have a Benjamin in your hand, but you've got something else that's got a value. I mean, we have to put it in context, and I think you've done a remarkable job in this. I would say that you need to have a hearing, and I think you need to go before Congress and just kind of put some things out there for all of us, including those in government and we little people out here, begin to fully understand it, because it is really kind of new in the context that you place it, right?
Yes, it is new, but it builds on American traditions of private and entrepreneurial currency.
Well, this is the age, and the age of the internet, especially as we're embarking on 5G. And I think there's going to be a lot of posturing by rogue governments and rogue operations to pay for things through cryptocurrency. So it's got some downsides, but I think the upsides are bigger. Would that be right?
I think you're right. I'm absolutely right about that.
This is quite the summary, John. Now, when you take on your next piece, where are you headed with it?
Well, I guess I'm going to delve in some of the issues you mentioned, specifically about what happens if governments try to take over or try to issue their own digital currency, including tyrannical governments, and why that wouldn't be. I mean, there's an impractical thing that the blockchain is like a voluntary peer-to-peer network. That's what maintains cryptocurrency and tries to prevent it from being hacked. And the blockchain, I'm going to look at the blockchain more itself, which was developed for Bitcoin, so that to keep the transactions flowing and to keep it from being hacked, so that it would be computationally impractical to try to counterfeit a Bitcoin. And it's worked mostly there, but it could be used for medical records and as well as mortgage titles, having all of that there, while at the same time, because of the encryption keys, you'd have better safeguards of privacy. So it has applications for a lot of things. And one of the dangers is will red tape smother that? Will the red tape for crypto, smother all these other blockchain applications before they even get off the ground? And you've got companies, like IBM becoming involved in this. I talked to a bunch of retired IBM employees, and they were excited about that, and they knew, and it was some of the things going back to the old encryption days during the war that they were during different wars they were familiar with. So I want to delve into more of what could be the specific applications. And
we look forward to it, ladies and gentlemen. Trot on over to CEI.org, cryptocurrency and the SEC's limitless power grab. John Berlau, thank you so much. I'm going to have you back because this is a topic certainly that we have to keep after to eliminate our fears. And ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way. So stay with us.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard to find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
Ladies and gentlemen, for riding along with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. I am just so excited about my next guest, Dr. Wilfred Reilly. He is a professor of political science at Kentucky State University, certainly a successful author, and he's well published for his scholarly work. And he has a new book, Hate Crime Hoax. So if you haven't grabbed it, this is your chance. Run on over to Amazon or any local bookstore and grab it. Fascinating topic. Dr. Reilly, welcome to the Denise Simon Experience.
Oh, very glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
The very first thing I do when I get books, and certainly something like this one, is I look at the bibliography/citation section. And you've got 44 pages to that. So that automatically tells me that this is well researched and lots of homework went into this. So with that, how long did it take to write this book?
It took about a year. By background, I'm a sales director. I worked for Evans International, Marcus Evans, and a couple of similar trading floors in Chicago. And one of the things you learn in that environment, that's how I paid for grad school, since I don't like ramen noodles all that much. But one of the things you learn in that environment is how to, perfectly ethically, but how to obtain emails and cell phones and so on, that sort of thing, from corporate websites, for example, and reach out to people and ask if they want to do business. And I had the idea of a book about the epidemic of hate crime hoaxes for a while. It was on my back burner while I was finishing up my academic writing, while I was closing out my own business, getting ready to teach, and so on. And Regnery, obviously, is known as one of the better center-right to conservative presses in the country. So I essentially looked through the Rolodex that I'd put together for them, and I contacted Tom Spence, who's one of their editors, and pitched the book idea. And at the time, he had no idea who I was. I mean, I hadn't worked with him before. So he asked me to write up about a 30-page prompt outlining what exactly got me. Yeah, well, the book had to be a lot longer than that. So I took about a week. I put that together. I sent it to him. And they bought the book in late 2017. So from about 2017 through, I sent it out January 2018. So for about a year, I was writing, I was gathering the cases, doing the research needed to put the book together. So it took about 11, 12 months.
So this whole topic of hate crimes and hoaxes that apply to many of the hate crimes, if not almost all of them, had to be a topic that was a fire in your belly for quite some time. Was there some particular event that started that flame?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is yes. I was actually involved, although very tangentially, in a hate crime hoax. And that led to my interest in a number of other hate crime cases that also turned out to be hoaxes. So in Chicago, as I recall, late 2012, a very well-known kind of city suburban dance club. It was called Velvet Ultra Lounge, and it was sort of the ultimate hipster city kid bar. It targeted a large bisexual audience on some nights. They had, ferns throughout the place, a lot of EDM, techno sort of music. But this bar that my girlfriend used to go to in Chicago was burned to the ground. And it was obvious from the police reports that an accelerant like gasoline or ethyl alcohol had been used to set the place on fire. And throughout the burnt shell of this popular building, there were written these sort of anti-gay epithets. And the immediate assumption on the part of kind of the center-left mainstream media in the city, the Sun-Times and so on, was that this, not completely illogically, but that this had been a hate crime. So there was a substantial amount of coverage of this, and I was following the case because people that I knew used to dance at the club. And this was part of the city's kind of grad student youth social scene for a while. I mean, there was a fundraiser held for the owner, Frank Elliott, who I've met once or twice. He actually was able to open up a new club, a bonsai bar, it's called. As far as I understand, it's still open. So this incident happened, and as media coverage of the incident progressed over the next year or two, it started to include citations to these other terrible-sounding hate crimes. So at the University of Chicago, for example, a student named Derek Kakaleen, a Hispanic guy, claimed that his Facebook page, I believe also his Twitter account, had been hacked. The codes had been cracked open, and these incredibly prejudiced messages had been posted. At one point, he claimed that someone threatened to rape him, to sodomize him. So that, again, was widely reported as a hate crime case. The Chicago Tribune gave it a front-page sidebar. The FBI got involved. So I followed that one. And, again, this is literally involving the grad student, senior undergrad community in Chicago. And more of these cases just kept appearing. At Grand Valley State up near Detroit, a young black woman claimed that someone apparently broke into her room, and on the whiteboard that college kids use had written things like "Black B, go home," N-words don't belong here, bleep Black History Month. This was on like the first day of Black History Month, pretty tacky. That was another case. At Michigan Tech, a guy named Matthew Schultz was expelled and charged with terrorism for allegedly threatening to shoot every black student on campus. So all of these cases were just widely reported, local papers. I mean, you can imagine Cub reporters that had gone to these schools like Grand Valley and MI Tech were following them. And they all turned out to be fakes, to kind of give the punchline rapidly. The Frank Elliott case, he basically owed a lot of people money, which isn't always the best idea in Chicago, and he set his own bar on fire. He was convicted. I believe he did a year in prison. I could be wrong about that. The other cases were also all fakes. Grand Valley State, the woman wrote the graffiti herself. Derek Kakaleen, when the feds looked at the IP addresses used, they found he'd sent himself the messages. And the most ridiculous one was Michigan Tech. This guy, Matthew Schultz, was actually a Christian kid, nice guy on campus. I think he was an athlete. He had said, "I'm tired of the racial tensions on campus. I'm going to shoot every black person I see a smile tomorrow." And what had happened was that someone had taken an iPhone or an Android, and they'd screenshot the message, and they'd use Photoshop to crop out the words "a smile." Intentionally making it look like the guy, who obviously is a young Caucasian male, was a potential mass shooter. So that, I think, was the most ridiculous of them. Schultz, because of how he had been expelled, actually ended up suing the campus and winning something like $50,000. So when I realized all these cases, these 5 or 6 very high-profile Midwestern cases had been fakes, I became interested in the idea of how many hate crime stories at the national level were fakes. And again, as I said, I contacted one of the better conservative presses, and I got the deal.
Woo!
It's an interesting backstory.
I like it. Because most of all, you stuck to it. That's huge. Now, go ahead.
Go on.
I was going to say, I listened to an awful lot of congressional hearings, and almost every single hearing, regardless of the topic. I mean, it could be on education, it could be on cyber, it could be on, but almost every single time the matter of hate crime is brought up, regardless of what the hearing is about. And it just kind of keeps floating out there. So when you just mentioned the cases that you that had piqued your interest, that you had kind of followed, a lot of times, Dr. Reilly, I guess what happens here is the first story out wins, and all the subsequent stories, including how they were determined to be fakes or hoax, they don't get picked up, do they?
Yeah, I think that's correct. So in a sentence, I mean, those are the cases that inspired the book. But my usual pitch line for the book when I do radio or TV is just that most of the very high-profile, widely publicized hate crime incidents in the past 4 or 5 years, I think it's fair to say, have turned out to be hoaxes. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that includes, obviously, Jussie Smollett. There's absolutely no doubt that was a hoax. A week before that, we saw Covington Catholic, where the claim, originally internationally famous, was that this group of prep school athletes had surrounded this elderly Native American man. They chanted, "Build the wall." They threatened to beat him and take his drum. Never happened. That was an argument between a couple of groups of males that the Caucasian kids didn't start. But, I mean, you saw Yasmin Saweed, the claim that Trump supporters attacked a young Muslim woman, ripped her favorite hijab. Eastern Michigan, there was allegedly graffiti all over the collegiate campus targeting black students. Air Force Academy, where there were so many alleged incidents, you had a general show up and speak against hate, Jay Silverio.
Yeah.
Grand Rapids, a young black girl claimed that boorish white men literally urinated on her. Kean College with the death threats, Wisconsin Parkside with the nooses. The University of Virginia, where the claim originally was that the fraternities were running kind of Story of O-style anti-woman rape rings in the frat houses that made the front page of Rolling Stone, Duke Lacrosse. I mean, all of these cases have turned out to be fake. I put together a data set of 409 confirmed hate crime hoaxes. This is concentrated in about 5 years, by the way, for the book. And that's currently up to 608. Jane Lingle, who does a lot of research with me, has continued adding incidents to the list. But, I mean, you're right. What happens typically with these stories is that the incident will be widely, sometimes internationally reported. Covington Catholic is probably the best example of it. There will be these brow-beating, hair-tearing headlines. What does this mean about white America or middle-class America overall? Suspicion will arise, and that will be reported on page 3, page 6, page 9. And finally, the case will be discovered, at least half the time, to be a hoax, but that will be reported on page 26 of the leisure and pet cat section of the paper. So, yeah, a lot of people don't know what happened in all of these cases. I gave a short speech, and someone asked me, well, what about real cases like Air Force Academy? And it was just kind of a softball over the plate. Well, Air Force Academy was a hoax. It turned out to be a black cadet that faked the incidents that allegedly occurred. Almost all reporting on that was, non-factual, by the way. It was at the Air Force Academy prep school, not the Air Force Academy itself. I mean, so that entire story was a hoax. And, yeah, that happens more often than you might think. I will say there are obviously... I'm center-right politically. I'm a businessman. I do some barking and shouting. But we can't ignore the fact that there are real hate crimes against, say, Orthodox Jews, Native Americans. Yeah.
Right.
But most of these high-profile cases, 6'5" black guy claims he was beaten by a mob, blue-haired college student says her dorm room was ransacked. Most of those turn out to be fakes. And
page 1.
You're correct.
Dr. Reilly, page 1, chapter 1. Second paragraph, you mentioned the Southern Poverty Law Center. I almost had to, when I saw that, it was like it had to be on purpose, because I think that they plant these seeds and then they just kind of fester from there on out. Am I overstating that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, so I'm going to give a broad comment there and then talk specifically about the SPLC, because I think the SPLC's had an interesting racket, is the word that comes to mind, just now getting exposed. So first of all, broadly, I don't think it's any secret that there's a large entrenched grievance industry in the USA.
Grievance
so
industry.
An entire sector, sorry?
I like that, grievance industry. I like that.
Well, yeah, these are big groups. I mean, so an entire sector of the U.S. economy, whether you're talking about affirmative action, which has been in place since 1967, I think there's some justification for class-based affirmative action. Our current system, which privileges essentially all non-whites, is pretty questionable. That would include recent immigrants, for example. But affirmative action, minority set-asides, I found out a couple weeks ago I could buy a radio station for about half price since I'm a black guy. I might do it, actually. I mean, I like money. But, I mean, so affirmative action, minority set-aside, especially the budgets for these very large, quote-unquote, civil rights groups. SPLC's endowment is $432 million. All that is dependent on the idea that there's a great deal of racial conflict in the USA. And I think both the left and the alt-right are wrong that there's a great deal of racial conflict in the USA. And if you actually look at the numbers, the USA desegregated in 1954. At that point, the only deeply segregated portion of the country, if you're talking about anything other than residential housing, was the Deep South. 1965, Civil Rights Act passed, so it's actually civilly and criminally illegal to be racist. If you feel you've been discriminated against, you don't need to pick up a sign. You can go down to the courthouse and file charges, civil charges. But in 1967, affirmative action. So for the past 52 years, it's arguable that we've actually been privileging minorities in applications for any middle-class job, any collegiate slot. 30% of marriages are outside of race. That goes up to 57% for Asians. So whether you view these things as good or bad, and I view most of them as good, the argument that there's massive racial conflict in the USA doesn't make sense. But an entire economic kind of substructure depends on that. So frankly, I think what happens when you see an atypical case that indicates white on black or white on Muslim racism, Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, for example, you can virtually guarantee, if you're a betting man, that case is going to receive national media coverage at least. And that's because it supports that narrative. And I do think almost all of these cases do fall apart. Like, as I'm sure you're aware, as a conservative commentator, George Zimmerman wasn't white. He was a Hispanic guy. Zimmerman is a Caucasian name, but George Zimmerman was Afro-Latino. He's darker skinned than I am. So it's questionable whether there's a story there in the first place.
Yes.
But whenever it appears there is, you can tell that certain groups are going to run with that. The SPLC, kind of last piece here, but the SPLC is a unique example of this because they're an activist group that very successfully pretended to be a civil rights group, I think you could say. So when you hear the phrase Southern Poverty Law Center, the first impression that comes to mind is how could anyone object to that? They do poverty law in the South. You have this image of black people being freed from sharecropping and, poor whites getting electricity, poverty law in the South. What the SPLC actually does is run a clearinghouse of conservative groups that they describe as hate groups.
You're so smart. I like the way you're saying all this. It's just so easy and simple. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean you seem a fun, intelligent person too. But no, a lot of this is fairly obvious, I think, to the average guy on a golf course or a basketball court. It is rarely mentioned in mainstream discourse because a very small percentage of the population controls mainstream discourse. I mean, the people that Mark Twain referred to as the guys who buy ink by the barrel. So that's still the mass media today. There's a coastal perspective, a sensationalist perspective. There is a leftist perspective. But, I mean, at any rate, the SPLC, if you ever look at the list of people that they rank as haters, I mean, Family Research Council's on there. I mean, that's one of the largest sort of American Christian activist groups. I guess the reason for that is that they've quote-unquote spoken disparagingly about gay Americans in the past. I don't think AIPAC is on the list right now, but the other one, Jewish Political Action Committee, JPAC, certainly is. They recently kind of hit a wall when they said that Quilliam Foundation was a hate group.
Yeah, and they won that case.
Oh, yeah, Majid Nawaz sued them, and I think more people, I mean, Laura Ingraham on her podcast has mentioned she might do this. I don't know if she's on the actual list, but she's been mentioned disparagingly by the SPLC. And these... Obviously, the left and right don't always like each other. But when you're talking about Quilliam Foundation or Laura Ingraham on Fox News, Family Research Council, I mean, you're just sort of talking about the mainstream of the other side. So the SPLC for years had been declaring groups like this to be hate mongers. And I think that eventually that kind of went too far. When Quilliam sued them for $3.18 million and won, you started seeing a lot of media interest in, okay, how are they able to do this? Should we be relying on the SPLC hate list? And that led to some investigations that from the sources I have, were partly responsible for Morris Dees being accused of racism and sexism. So there's not a whole circus over there. I mean, Dees, as I understand, has resigned.
Yes.
And there have been a ton of front page headlines looking at sort of what are they doing? How much of their money is actually spent on legal services? You know, how could their chair have been abusing women? And it's not funny, but abusing women for 20 years. So we'll see what happens to the SPLC. But I mean, I do think that that is an example of how entrenched bias can operate, that a very well-known far-left group for years presented itself as kind of a mainstream civil rights organization, and no one really objected to this until groups like Quilliam and FRC started to actually sue them in court and say, no, we're mainstream conservatives, we're not hate mongers.
Dr. Reilly, is money and fame and victimhood the ultimate objective of these hoaxes?
Well, most of them. I mean, so in general, criminals tend to be bad, lazy people. You see exceptions to this for war crimes or stock fraud or something like this. But in general, people commit crimes for a very easily definable set of kind of tawdry personal reasons. Money is obviously the main motivator. You know, Jesse James said he robbed banks because that's where the money was. You see sex, certainly, for perhaps assault or prostitution. You see local notoriety for something like graffiti. So hate hoaxers tend to hoax for all of those reasons. I mean, Jussie Smollett's reason for pretending that he was beaten up, or I guess having his friends beat him up, was that he thought he was underpaid. He was only making $65,000 per episode of Empire. And that, well, it sounds pretty good. It sounds like a good quarter to me. I mean, but while that sounds solid, you know, he felt he was underpaid because there are other people on the show like Terrence Howard who really are some of the country's best actors when they were getting millions. So his idea, I guess, was that if he presented himself as a sympathetic hero figure, you know, black warrior attacked by white Trumpers, fought him off, he would receive a boost in his salary. So the individual hoaxer's motivations are pretty much the same as the motivations of most other criminals. I think that what makes the hoax sector interesting is that as a country, we have started to privilege victimization in these weird ways.
Yes.
And this actually takes a lot of interesting forms. I mean, so most universities have seminars on how to prevent sexual assault, for example. And when we were thinking up this year's, I mean, I suggested some basic things like, should we encourage women to carry weapons, or should we encourage both men and women to drink less? And I think those two things combined would reduce sexual assault by probably 90%. Mm-hmm. But the idea was, no. What we need to do, there's never any reason ever to blame or criticize a victim. What we need to do is sort of tell men they shouldn't rape people. And as a man, I viewed this almost as insulting. I mean, I think most men know, objectively speaking, sober, that they shouldn't rape people. But the idea behind all this is that you can never criticize, and obviously, of course, the blame for rape or robbery does lie with the rapist or robber. But the idea here is that you should never criticize a victim, that the victim has earned a unique right to speak that the rest of us do not have. Mm-hmm. And I think that that reification of victimhood at some level is behind the hate hoax epidemic, simply because what people are pretending to be is victim. If we didn't glorify victimhood, if the idea was, okay, well, you made a lot of obnoxious political statements and you went walking alone at 2 a.m, you lost a fight, all right, so what? There would be no reason to fake most of these incidents. So I think that that's the background narrative, that we have decided that there's this kind of intersectional hierarchy, where the more oppressed one is, the more one gets to speak. And that's led to the odd phenomenon of perfectly well-adjusted middle-class citizens, white and black, pretending that they are very oppressed. That combined with the activist group involvement, I think, is why you see so many hate hoaxes. People know that if they are believed when they tell one of these stories, they will be treated as a victim. And people know that if they appear to be a victim, there are allies that are going to come out of the woodwork and support them.
Dr. Reilly, you're getting smarter by the minute. I mean, just remarkably simple the way you've explained it all. And you're so right about, I wrote down grievance industry because I think it is so perfect. I mean, it is just so perfect. The one thing that comes to mind is the Kavanaugh hearings, because those 2 women, or 3, whatever number it ended up being, have kind of faded away too.
Well, it got to like 6. Remember, he was supposed to have fought someone on a boat.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. I'm going to go back and say it. You have got guts and courage that I haven't seen in a while. So if I could handshake through the microphone, I would certainly do that, maybe even so far as a hug, if that was politically correct.
We can definitely do an electronic hug.
I like it. Ladies and gentlemen, please go grab this, because I think that this book, Hate Crime Hoax, Dr. Wilfred Reilly has certainly put things in perspective. I think you have done a public service with this book. One that I think that a lot of members of Congress themselves actually need to read. And the fact that you can continue to add to these cases, I mean, week by week or month by month, into itself tells that there's kind of an epidemic, eh?
Yeah, there's no shortage of these cases. I mean, so actually right after Jussie Smollett, we saw the Nikki Jolie case, which, as I understand, started a bit before Mr. Smollett's. But this was a case where a transgender activist, a woman who now identifies as a man, so I'll say he in the politically correct parlance, but Nikki Jolie set his house on fire with 2 purebred German shepherds, a bunch of cats, a lot of family antiques inside it. And this case, again, became an international story, at least for a couple of days, until people became aware of, the full backstory that went back years and what the charges were and so on. But, I mean, that case occurred right after the Smollett thing reached the news and then was exposed as a hoax. We've since seen another case where the African-American mayor in a South Carolina town claimed that white vandals spray painted her car with some kind of, she called it a disgusting yellow paste.
And it was pollen.
Trees. Yeah. It's the blooming season, so it was tree pollen. She planted under some trees. So there was, let's say bird leavings, and there was pollen on the car. And the idea was apparently that, vandals had come by with a bag of
that one was comical. Ladies and gentlemen, please go grab this book, Hate Crime Hoax. Dr. Wilfred Reilly, thank you. I mean, just thank you. Well done. And I'm going to tap you on the shoulder again, because this conversation, this discussion is huge. Ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way. So stay with us.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.
Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right On, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. See ya, over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. See ya, out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to leave the United States here for a little while, and we're going to travel on over to the UK because my buddy David Clews with UK Unity has been gracious enough to join us. And thank you, David, for doing this. We're not reporting over here in the United States much about what's going on in the UK, but I would argue you've got all kinds of chaos going on over there. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an absolute mess just now, Denise. It's embarrassing, to be honest with you.
We're just as embarrassed for other reasons as you guys are.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the thing. Nigel Farage got a little blip of a headline over here because he's decided to get back into politics and created a new political party, otherwise known as Brexit.
The Brexit Party.
So give us a better summary than we probably got over here on what Nigel's doing.
Okay, so we were supposed to have left the European Union on the 29th of March. However, we haven't, because the government have been unable to come to a deal with the European Union. Because we should have just walked away, but the UK Parliament have said, no, we have to get a deal. So it's embarrassing. So we're still in the European Union, which means that on May the 23rd, we have to now take part in European Union elections. And Mr. Farage has now, Nigel Farage used to be UKIP, and there's been a bit of argy-bargy between him and UKIP, and he's decided to go and set up his own new party, which is cleverly called the Brexit Party. And he is hoping to win these EU elections. But the problem is, it's a pointless election because these people might get elected to the European Parliament that we might still leave in like 2 or 3 months. So it's crazy.
Now, do we have it right that Nigel wants this Brexit thing to happen, deal or no deal, like it's overdue and right now?
So Nigel Farage wants a full, clean, it's called a WTO Brexit, which means World Trade Order Brexit, which means we just walk away from the negotiations and we don't pay them any money and we just trade on WTO rules.
That sounds like it would be in line with how the Brexit vote came down. Is that right?
Correct. Poll after poll has shown that the majority of people in the United Kingdom want a proper WTO Brexit. And the problem you've got is Parliament doesn't. Parliament doesn't. Our elected officials don't even want to leave the EU, let alone do it on a no-deal basis.
Are the members of Parliament really towing the line coming out of the EU leadership, which is, I would argue, being essentially advised by Merkel?
Yes, I mean this is the problem. Is you've got our British elected parliamentarians who are doing the bidding of the European Union, and you see, I've actually got a new argument about why Britain needs to leave the EU. Merkel, Macron, they want to make Europe even more integrated. They want like an EU army. They want to give up even more powers. I don't actually think they want Britain to be part of it anymore. Because we're too much of a thorn in their side. We don't really believe in the European project that much.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you really kind of look at history, nobody wanted it. Certainly the citizens never really wanted it, but the leaderships all kind of got together because they were necessarily forecasting an immigration crisis and a financial crisis where everybody was going to share the burden, right? Yep.
That's exactly right. And the open borders policy could bring down the EU eventually, because you've now got people like Matteo Salvini in Italy, Viktor Orban in Hungary, and you've got the chance of Marine Le Pen winning in France, and they don't like the European Union. They don't like the direction it's going.
Poland and yeah.
And this open borders policy and the mass migration that's taking place, it's completely unsustainable. And apart from the elites and the leaderships of countries, no one agrees with them.
David, what are the financial implications for Britain, especially if you continue inside the EU? I would argue that if this Brexit thing continues to be stalled, Britain's facing a real financial crisis. Has anybody predicted that, or am I overstating it?
If I'm being honest, I think you're overstating it slightly, because the British economy is actually doing quite well just now. But this uncertainty, it is starting to slow down now. I don't think we would have a crash or anything like that, but people maybe aren't deciding to buy houses. They're maybe putting purchases off because they want to see how Brexit plays out. See, the big thing is, leaving the European Union isn't actually that huge a deal. It's only the politicians and the establishment and like multinational big businesses that want us to stay part of it and are making it so difficult.
What about Ireland? What's the position of Ireland here at this point?
Well, again, they have said they need a deal because they don't want a hard border. But both Britain and the Republic of Ireland have said they won't create a hard border. To be honest with you, it's an issue that isn't really real, but it's been magnified by people trying to stop us leaving the EU.
What's the United States' role in this? I know under the Obama administration, they were trying to keep, the EU together. But now we're with the Trump administration. It looks as though we're staying somewhat detached. Is that right?
Well, Obama came over during the referendum and said, if Britain leaves the EU, then you'll be at the back of the queue for a trade deal.
Right.
And you know what? It probably put about 5 or 10 percentage points up to the leave vote, because people are like, who does he think he is coming over here telling us what to do? And the reality is, we buy more from Europe than they buy from us. So there is a trade, we have a trade surplus when we deal with Europe. So it's not in Europe's interest. But honestly, Denise, the big problem we have in this country is a failure of the political class. It would be like Nancy Pelosi running your negotiations.
Yeah.
Or
And she
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah. I mean, Pelosi was just over there in Ireland too.
What's that? Sorry.
Pelosi was just in Ireland talking about a trade thing.
And then she says that if the Good Friday Agreement's not honoured, you'll be at the back of the deal. Listen, it's nonsense, because at the end of the day, trade wars are not in anyone's interest. People need to work together.
So what's the timeline? What do you forecast for the timeline here at this point, David?
Well, what might happen is Theresa May and the Labour Party and the Conservative Party will get together and they'll push through what's called a soft Brexit. So the two key things are the customs union and the single market. So the chances are we'll stay in the customs union as part of this really soft Brexit. And that's not really Brexit at all. So this is just going to keep dragging on for years and years and years.
Is there a chance to call for another vote, and the vote says we want a clean break, by May the 1st or something?
There is a school of thought that says it might take a second referendum, and it would be based on, do you want a clean WTO Brexit or remain? And I think a WTO Brexit on that would win. But the fact remains, people voted to leave. We should be leaving properly. That's my wee boys come through. We should be leaving properly. And if we don't, it's a failure of the political class to deliver. And honestly, politicians now are hated in the UK. They're the lowest they've ever been in terms of people's thinking on them.
When's the last time? I mean, it looks like Theresa May is only dealing with, the European Union leadership and Merkel, but it doesn't look like she's having any conversations with any other European leaders.
That's because what's the point? Angela Merkel runs the European Union.
Yeah, okay, that's where I wanted you to go. But she's on her way out the door too, is she not?
Yeah, she is. But she still exerts a huge amount of power.
And is that because of their economy is the largest in the European Union, or how is it that she wields so much power?
Well, the problem with the EU is it's got 20, well, including Britain, it's got 28 member states. Out of that, I can't remember the exact number, but something like only 4 or 5 are net contributors to the EU budget. Maybe it's a bit more. It's maybe about 6 or 7. So leaving Britain, not the contribution going in, means that they will have a black hole and a shortfall. Because Britain's a net contributor to the tune of about 12 billion a year. So if Britain leaves, that means they've got a budget gap of 12 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the other problem with the European Union. You've got all these countries that don't contribute to it.
Right. We're back to the shared liabilities.
Well, yeah. It's grown. The EU has now grown too big and too bulky and too many different things. And there's another school of thought that it will eventually just collapse in on itself because it's too unwieldy. It's too big. A bit like the USSR. It just can't continue.
What's going on with the protests? Are they still going on pretty much every day or every weekend or what?
Pro-Brexit protests.
Yeah.
I mean, we're having some, but I think that there's not been like huge demonstrations because I think people are they're still waiting to see how it all plays out, and I think it's just there's a wider sense of just people are just beaten down by the whole process, and this is a problem. There's apathy.
So you guys have a little less patience than I guess that we have over here, or maybe more patience. You got more patience.
I think we've got more. I think There is the Conservative Party, though, because of what they've done, could be finished because of this. I mean, they were polling at 23% in the latest opinion poll.
Is Cameron in Prime Minister Cameron? Is he still in any of the talks, or has he just been completely sidelined?
He has a shed at the bottom of his garden that he got in, and he's just writing his books.
Oh, is that all he's doing?
Cameron's finished. Anyone that was involved in the referendum. See, even if you were on the winning side in the referendum, politically you're finished. The culture in the UK is so toxic now in politics that everyone who was involved in it is finished. And whilst Farage isn't loved by a lot of people, at least people know what they're getting with him.
Mm-hmm. Well, he seems to be, very close to the Trump White House, and
he is.
And what's particularly fascinating is, we keep the left over here in the United States keeps calling, the Trump White House and Trump, a nationalist, but nobody seems to be doing that with the whole Brexit movement. And I argue that there's nothing wrong with nationalism.
Well, what increasingly you're actually getting is people say that everyone who voted to leave the EU was a racist, was
right.
So there is an attempt to try and make out that Leave voters are bigots, but it's just obviously it's not true. And as I said, the one thing I would take to a message to your listeners is the political class in the UK is hated. The media in the UK is absolutely hated as well. It's just the same as it is in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happened in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, so pretty much same here. I mean, I think that we're walking in cadence down this whole path here, with where Britain is. We've got what was necessarily known as the North American Union between Mexico and the United States and Canada. So while we're only dealing necessarily with 3 countries, we essentially don't have any borders between the 3. And we're trying to make some of those declarations. We have a little bit of a different, model over here. And I wish some of our politicians would introduce a piece of legislation that says we want to reaffirm our sovereignty and our borders here in the United States. And along with that, we want to reaffirm that we are not a socialist country. I don't know if your parliament can do that kind of thing, can they?
But no, because they are just so this ideology of open borders and uncontrolled immigration it is loved by the global elites, and it's loved by big business and multinationals, but it's hated by the politicians. And the reality is you cannot run a country, a developed country, not knowing who's coming in and out of the country. It's unsustainable.
Well, that's it. And then when you've got somebody like Turkey that gets a say in your policy and in your Germany shouldn't have any voice in governing
British politics.
Britain.
Well, I agree. And do you know what's actually really interesting is that initially the Brexit argument was actually left-wingers in Britain that argued it, because they argued that it was bad for workers' rights and it was bad for the EU was bad for the lack of democracy. And that is the fundamental thing. Like Donald Tusk, Jean-Claude Juncker, the EC president and commissioners, they have a say in British public life, and no one's elected them.
Right. David, we got the same thing going on over here. Where, we've got 3 countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, that we never even hear from those countries, much less Mexico. And by default, because those countries are in a financial tailspin, it's dictating policy here in the United States. So we're not really in any different condition, correct?
Correct. And the argument I always make is just the problem with allowing open borders immigration is you get people coming, but also what happens is the intelligentsia of these countries, the successful people all leave, and then these countries become failed states, and the immigration becomes even worse.
Right. Exactly right. Do you have any of these migrants, by the way, that are kind of going back to their home countries in any numbers? I'm seeing where some are going back.
There's small amounts of people leaving, going back to European Union countries, but no, on the whole, Britain's still running at net immigration every year of about 300,000. So that's like over, in Britain's population zone, maybe about 300,000 or 400,000, and that's known. You've also got the big issue is illegal immigration, like in America, there's so many illegal immigrants. So there's probably about 400,000 or 500,000 people a year coming into the UK. You know, you take that over 10 years, that's 5 million people. That's half the size of London.
Yeah, our numbers are a little bit bigger than yours, but nonetheless, on a percentage basis, it's probably about the same.
The other issue we have here is that there is not that the space and the housing is much less. I mean, not that America is obviously a huge country,
right?
But we are very short of space. Because you see the map of the UK, like most of Scotland's uninhabitable, most of Wales is, many parts of England are. It's just there's just small belts that you can actually live in. So housing's a huge issue, and then you've got pressures on your health system. People can't get appointments with their doctor.
Education,
education. It's just the government and the way the people that have run this country have run it into the ground, and something big needs to change in British politics.
Based on what you just said, you know, when it comes to housing, we're out of housing. I mean, we've got tent cities over here in the United States for the the impact on healthcare and education and law enforcement is unspeakable. So, well, David,
sorry, on you go.
I was just going to say I'm very happy that you could join us and kind of explain this thing a little bit better in detail, because we're tracking about as close as we can possibly track. I'm going to stay close to what you're doing there, ladies and gentlemen. It's ukunity.org, and big hat tip to Dave Clews for being with us, and there's more coming your way, so stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey, gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here in the Denise Simon Experience. Okay, for any of you that endured the Bernie Sanders town hall on Fox, we're going to discuss this one because the socialism thing just isn't going away. So what do? Well, I tap my buddy way out there on the left coast, Tom Del Beccaro, lawyer of great distinction, political pundit, Fox News contributor, writes for Forbes, and the author of A Divided Era, because he's kind of a numbers guru. And, I think he's got some insight here that I lean on quite often. So thank you, Mr. Tom, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Of course. Always fun to be here. I endured the Bernie thing until I couldn't.
I just look. There are a couple of things that struck me, and it was an exchange that I think Bernie Sanders was having with Martha McCallum on how you pay for Medicare for all, and exactly you don't. But he walked around that one and threw out some stuff, but he eventually came down to the term public money. And I argue that I didn't like that one. I did not like that one because that it's truly an admission that politicians, especially Democrats, believe that tax revenues or any other revenues that go into the government are theirs exclusively and they have pure dominion over. And so then I continued to think, and I don't mean to take up all your time and mine too, but so then I thought, okay, taxation without representation. So I go trotting back in history, and of course that gave us the Stamp Act, and then that was repealed, and then we had something called the Declaratory Act, and then that didn't get repealed until 1964. So since 1964, we've had nothing. What say you?
Well, listen, I'm surprised only one thing struck you about that. First of all, the thing that struck me initially was that he was unwilling to answer. And I thought, honestly, you can tell the difference between a lawyer and a non-lawyer because they let him off the hook. He would not answer about, why aren't you paying these higher amounts? Or are you okay with the 52%? Whoa, we should get Trump, blah, blah, blah. He could not
exactly.
answer questions. And then, of course, he said, he admitted to, I grew up in New York, and if you're in the old days in the streets of New York during the Dinkin era, I know that's before your time, but you'd be on the corner, and you'd be on the corner, and there'd be a guy with a little makeshift table and 3 cards that were bent, and he was going to take your money. It's a shell game. He admits that first he says, well, we're going to get rid of premiums and we're going to get rid of deductibles and we're going to get rid of all of these things and it'll be cheaper for everyone. And then Martha McCallum pushed on him on this one in particular. And he finally comes, well, yes, we are going to have to, people are going to have to pay more. And I'm thinking, well, which is it? And where is it? And what is this game? But overall, with this guy, and I don't know if it's because he's kind of like the crazy professor in some bad show, or just in general. But I mean, it's the notion of socialism. My dad, one of the first lessons I ever had in politics was my dad telling me, and I remember it as clear as day. He said the Democrats have it made, and this is in the 60s, because they're convincing people they can vote themselves rich. And he wasn't the first to say it, but that was the lesson, and there it is. He's just telling people you're going to get everything, and laughably he says you can go to any doctor you want. And what he doesn't say is, as long as that doctor agrees to work 40% less than he's getting now, because that's where his cost savings come in. And I'm not saying that there aren't doctors who bill too much or aren't all of these things, but the vast majority of doctors are overworked and honest, and they're not going to take that pay cut. Atlas is going to shrug. Mm-hmm. There's going to be line. Historically, people need to understand that the only communist system that works is the family. It's a parent, two-parent family, however you want to describe it, who goes and earns money and gives it to the kids as is their need. Beyond that, it's a failed system. And the notion that you're going to, and the other end of that is, the larger the population involved, the less it works and the more authoritarian it has to be. That's why you get a Mao and a Stalin in a big place. You don't necessarily get it in a small place. So the idea that they can impose Medicare for all on 360 million people is laughable. And then, of course, if you tell the drug companies how much they can charge,
yes,
then it all goes away, because then they don't do research.
Well, and that's exactly where I was just going to go. What happens to the doctors that are working diligently at research? What happens to the scientists and the physicists and to the drug companies? There won't be any innovation anymore. I mean, the last great machine that we would have would be the MRI, right?
Yes, the vast majority in the last 50 years of great advances have occurred in the United States. Now, look, there's been a lot of mergers and buyouts by companies that may be located in different countries. But the reality is, innovation, the majority of innovation has come from the United States. And if you take that away, basically what you're saying is they're going to have to put all their resources in actual treatment versus research, because you don't get to bill for research. You don't get to bill Medicare for research, that kind of thing. So look, yeah, it's a terrible system. And the point I'm saying is that it's geometrically worse as the larger the population, because there's no way to enforce it. And then there's the cheating. We already know. I always laugh at these things that say, oh, the drug companies are making profit. We'll get away from that. Or the drug companies have so much administration. We'll get away from that. No, you won't. You know why the federal government folks who are listening in to this broadcast, you know why the federal government has lower admin costs? Because they don't enforce fraud. There's hundreds of billions of Medicare fraud.
To the point where the FBI has a specific division dedicated agents that do nothing but investigate Medicare fraud.
And they still don't get it all.
No.
But that's not counted as administration. So of course the administration's lower because they have no incentive to provide anything at a well done pay, or do it efficiently. It's like the post office. I mean, I don't know if you saw online. The post office. I've had the same business address for 17 years. I pay extra to order something from Italy, and the post office somehow says they can't deliver it they couldn't deliver it to my address. I'm like, you come every day. And so I get on the phone with the guy and I say, well, why didn't you deliver it? He goes, well, we need to investigate that. The point is that there's no
recourse.
This problem. There's no incentive.
A glitch.
Their pay is completely detached from their performance. Once you start doing that, it all comes apart. So this is not to say that there aren't problems with the United States medical system. This is not to say that the government should set up a better set of laws so that the market can do things better where it can. And I'm not even saying that we shouldn't help people that have pre-existing conditions. But one thing's for sure, telling doctors you're going to take 40% less and we're going to rate, and everybody gets into one system doesn't work. Socialism has always failed, but you see the allure of it with Bernie. We're going to do it for, I can't do a good impression of him. I really want to. I got to learn that. But he just says, we're all going to have it. And then you're like, well, how are you going to pay for it? And he'll say, and he won't.
Public dollars.
Yes, public. Whatever. It's like Ocasio-Cortez. You just do.
And I would argue the audience that was there, they're not thinking. They're just loving the platitudes that come out from the Bernies and the Beto's and the rest of them.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to give young people an opportunity. Well, young people have an opportunity. I mean, I just hear these platitudes, and there's 100%. No substance to any of it. They're selling a wish. They're selling that we're going to deliver on your wish, and
yeah, and it's the same crowd that listens, honestly, to income inequality. Years ago, I went to a junior college in a very diverse, economically, religiously, ethnicity place. And it was me against a Democrat, and this income inequality came up. And I there's probably about 140, maybe 100 kids. And how old are you in a junior college? You're, 19 to 20 something, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I raised my hand and I said, my daughter is 21 and I'm not. And I'm, so I was probably 51 at the time. And I said, I've been working 26 years. She's been working 1. How many of you think our income should be the same? Not one kid raised their hand. I said, okay, wealth inequality. How many of you think she should have the same wealth as I did, even though I went an extra 3 years to school and I have been working this long? Not one kid raised their hand. And so it is this non-thinking notion. And the importance, of course, income, let's finish the loop. Income inequality is really important because if I don't have the savings to start the restaurant, I can't hire the kid or anyone else to be the dishwasher or the waiter, and it's arguable that I'll have more money than those people. But it's this non-thinking platitude that inequality is bad. Look, I would love to have the same capacity as Phil Mickelson in golf. I'm telling you. But it can't be legislated, and it shouldn't, because that's his passion. I have a different passion. And look, I think I'm much better at making tomato sauce than you are, Denise, or our mutual friend Donna Fiducian. I know that's going to start a war across the country. But we have different skills. We have different abilities. And
we're supposed to.
Because I'll never be the painter. I marvel at Filippo Lippo's paintings. I don't even have the time to conceive it. But I do other things, and I'm happy. And by the way, I get to look at his stuff and buy books with it, and I get to buy golf balls. And some people need my legal services. That's what you want. You want someone who excels in this inequality. But no, socialism, and as Oswald Spengler talked about this about 100 years ago. He talked a lot about this. At its root, at its core, a socialist, anyone who proclaims anything remotely socialist, wants one size for all for everything. That's
and they sell it
logical.
They sell it with a very narrow menu of choices, just so it doesn't look like full-blown socialism, which is what I argue that Common Core education was about. And if you don't think that Common Core is still not out there, it is. It just gets renamed. So they're telling you you cannot go study literature anymore. You cannot go study physical education. You cannot go study these things. These are the jobs of the future. You have your choice, and your choices are 6. Figure it out.
Yes, which is a horrible thing, because the reality is you need people through their own imagination and through their own way of figuring things out to stumble upon ideas and change the world. The other point that's really important about Bernie and the rest of the socialists is they make their sale by saying you are being cheated by someone.
Oh, yeah.
And that is divisive in its nature. How do you run for president, by the way, of an entire nation and say you were cheated, so therefore vote for me? I mean, I just think that George Washington didn't go around saying all you people were cheated. He did, he did look at the revolution. He said it's time for us to decide whether we're going to be freed men or slaves. That's a different issue. When he ran for president, he didn't say, I hate half the country and I like half the country, and that's how I'm going to lead.
I'm not convinced that Bernie Sanders' political career was really any different than that of Barack Obama's, because neither of them had any kind of a job, if you will, that wasn't outside of being an activist that moved them into politics, right?
You're 100% right. Look, there's all these kids today that come right out of college and go work in some for some assemblyman or senator somewhere, and then then they think they know what policy is. No, these people have no clue about you. They don't learn anything in school other than government collectivism, and then they go on to government where they push more collectivism. No, this is the reality. But back to where we started with Bernie. Bernie is doing no more than my father ever suggested, which is that he's telling people, vote for me and you will have more through government. And they think, okay, that doesn't cost me. It costs the person that Bernie says is cheating me.
Right.
That's their whole game. And the question is whether we as a society have really fallen that far that we would buy into that. And everybody always says, well, that could never happen here, until it does.
And so now we go right back to the whole education thing, because those fans, those Bernie supporters in that town hall were early to middle age, I would argue. Some of them may have been a little bit older, but they've been sold on the notion through education and through public policy, social justice, socialism. They may not call it socialism, but those seeds were planted, and there's no critical thinking anymore.
No, 100%. Look, I always say when there are fulcrums of history, and what I mean by that, civilizations rise and they fall, and there is a fulcrum point between the rise and the fall. The fulcrum points are things like when we start to revile the producer and exclaim the virtues of the redistributor. But another fulcrum is when public schools take over and teach people that their past is bad, that the capitalist is bad, and that therefore government is good. And everything that went before must be erased. When you get to that point, you are firmly on the downside of your civilization, and that's what we see today.
And so, given that we are on the heels of the devastating fire of Notre Dame Cathedral, that we have two capitalists from the Louis Vuitton family and the Gucci family that immediately were the first two that coughed up collectively between the two almost $300 million to begin the reconstruction. So capitalism jumped in real fast, didn't they?
It always has. Before the Great Depression, Will Durant said that in all these New Deals and whatever, that a third of the money in circulation had been given away in charity in any 1 year. So, yes, but now we give it the office. We used to say, no, I gave it the office. Now we say, no, we give it government. Some people are charitable. Mm-hmm. As government and socialism grows, being charitable drops. And government's wasteful, charitable it generally isn't. Yes, there's scams. I don't know. What foundation, Denise, was the scam?
Oh, Clinton?
Yeah. Which is, I don't know.
I had a tough time trying to say.
Your listeners probably know this, but it's estimated that the Clinton Foundation charitably gave only 6 to 8%, which is obscene. That's ridiculous. 92% administrative costs? Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Hey, but they should be in charge of your health care. I'm just saying that right now.
Well, I mean, effectively, the post office is a government operation that hasn't run well. Amtrak, the entire rail system, is completely subsidized.
It doesn't. When you remove people running things for which they have no personal accountability, have never, ever, it's never worked. So why they think it, I'm always stunned with it. When the left says, oh, the Department of Defense is wasting money. Just them? Of course government wastes money. So why do you want the government you create over there for your benefit will waste just as much as the government that's the other side wants over there for its benefit?
I want somebody in Washington, D.C. to come up with a modern-day Stamp Act. I want taxation with representation. Can I get that before I die, Mr. Tom Del Beccaro? No.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to go for give me liberty or give me death. Little known historical fact. You ready?
Okay.
Do you know who, in effect, purchased the right to collect revenues from Stamp Acts? Of course, the Stamp Act never actually collected any money because Patrick Henry stood up and said, give me liberty or give me death. But what American founding father actually acquired the right? No.
Who?
He was arguably the most famous American in the world at the time.
Franklin?
Yes, Ben Franklin acquired rights to do the Stamp Act, but of course, it never actually went into force, so he never went out and did that.
Right.
And by the way, so people don't know, throughout history, governments, the Roman Empire did this. They outsourced tax collection, and that led to abuses.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what, and the Stamp Act would have been an outsourced tax collection method.
I want somebody to give me a modern day Stamp Act.
But as long as you have Bernie Sanders there, there'll be no problem with any of this socialism.
Of course not.
You intimated otherwise, Denise. Sure.
Well, I think maybe we ought to, since you're so good at writing, much better than me, I think you ought to presume now that we have Medicare for all and then predict the issues that will come so we can use them as talking points in these subsequent town halls that we're going to have with Cory Booker and Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, right?
I'll do it. I'll get on it.
Okay. I think really, I mean, we need to know the consequence because there's always a consequence that I would argue in this case the Democrats have not thought about, and certainly those people that are sitting there as Bernie supporters, they're not thinking of the consequences either. So we may have we never realized that ultimate cure for Alzheimer's because we're all, our doctors are going to be on government payroll. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. A big, huge round of applause to Mr. Tom Del Beccaro for giving us some insight here. We do need a Stamp Act. We're very happy that you could travel with us, and we'll see you again very soon.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic Radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.